going to create a clicker game. So to begin with, we're going to go to create a new Xcode project. And I'm going to go for an iOS app. I'm going to call this idle clicker for now. And I don't need any core data or anything else. I'm going to save this on the desktop, and I'm going to make this full screen. Now, with an idle clicker, I'm going to leave this really generic, and by that I mean I'm just going to have, I'm not going to have a theme on it. So I'm going to create a new group from selection for our views, and I'm going to create a new group called models, like such. So our first model, what we're going to do is create a Swift file, and this is going to be for our points. So I'm going to call this points generator, and because this is generic, we're not going to count in dollars or anything like that. So we're just going to have our point generator, and it is identifiable, and it'll have an ID as a UUID, and it'll have a name. You can change this name later, and points per second is going to be an integer. And it's also going to have a level as an integer. So as the user levels it up kind of thing, we can reflect that on the user interface. Okay, so that's our points generator. So then we're actually going to create another view, not another group, my apologies. We're going to create another file. This is going to be our game state. This is going to have all of the magic happen in it. So we're going to go for another Swift file, game state. And this is going to be a class called game state. And again, this is actually going to be observable. So as it changes, it updates the user interface. And to record what's observed, we make a published variables. So we need the points for the game, or how much currency we have, or cookies, or whatever we want to call them. We have our published var points per second. And we have a published variable called point generators. And I'm going to start, and these are going to be a list of the point generator that we just created in our previous view, our previous model, I should say. And this is going to be a list of point generators. So I'm going to create 4 of them, point generator. And I'm not going to need an ID, but I'm going to need a name. So let's call this first one, again, nice and generic. You guys can modify this so it says something else. Point generator number 1. Points per second, we're going to give this one points per second of 1. It's going to need a price 2, which I forgot. So we're actually going to need a price as an int. This is actually going to need a var as well, because we're going to need to know how much it costs. And so we're going to need to add a price in here. Let's make it a price of 50, and it's going to start at level 0. I'm going to put a comma in the end, and I'm going to copy, and I'm going to paste this another 4 times, 5 times. So we're going to have point generator 2, 3, 4, and 5. Point generator 2 is going to cost 100 credits, but it's going to generate 2 points. Point generator 3 is going to generate 5 points per second, and it costs 250. The next one's going to generate 10 points, and it's going to be cost of 500. And the last one will make it generate 25 points per second, but its cost 1,000 credits. You can see the last item in the list doesn't have a comma in it either. So I'm going to do Command B to build, just to make sure I've got no errors yet. Fantastic. Next, outside of this list, so my list is finished, I'm then going to create a timer, but I'm going to assign it a bit later, so I'm going to leave it optional, and I'm going to assign it when we load our view. And when we initialize, we can go self.points. Let's start with 1. Self.timer is going to be a timer .scheduled timer with time interval. We're going to go every 1 second. We're not going to need a target or selector, but we're going to need repeats. And we're going to say true. We do want it to repeat. And then we want our block underscore in. So you can see my timer actually, this open bracket here finishes down here, and our block open squiggly bracket or parentheses closes here. So we're working within our block. And we're going to go self.tick. Now this tick function hasn't happened yet. So we're going to need a function called tick. And we're going to call that every second while our game is running. See, we need a with time interval, and we've got time interval. So I need a with time interval. And I'm going to build again. So every second, this game is going to call this function tick, which we're not doing anything with yet. We're also going to have a click function. So when the user taps, it does something. And when the user taps, self.points, we're going to add 1 to our points every time the user taps on the screen. We're going to handle the tick a little bit later. We also need a function for purchase when we purchase levels or purchase our point generators. And so we're going to need to know which point generator we're using or which point generator we're purchasing. If the point generator.price is less than or equal to our self.points, then so basically we can afford it, then self.points is going to take away the price of the point generator, generator.price, because otherwise we don't actually charge them for it. And self.points per second is then going to increase by the point generator. I'm just going to copy this, it's going to be quicker, dot points per second. So however many points per second the point generator actually adds. So remember we said 1, 2, 3, 5, 10, and 25 points. So that's going to increase our game points per second. I'm also going to create a variable called new point generator. Now what I'm doing here, this point generator, once we've allocated the level to it, we've got to replace our list of point generators with a new list where our level is going to be 1 or 2 or 3. So we're going to add to the level. So to do that, it's a little bit more complicated. So new point generators is going to equal our current game dot point generators. And then I'm going to figure out which point generator we've purchased using the index. And we're going to say new point generators dot first index, where I'm going to use a squiggly bracket, the ID matches our current point generator that we purchased .id. So when they match, and I'm going to force unwrap because I'm going to say this point generator does exist. And then I can go self.pointGenerators. Before I do this, I need this new point generator index. So the one that we've purchased, .level, we're going to plus 1 to our level. Then we can say self.pointGenerators is going to be assigned this list of new point generators. So we're overwriting the original list of point generators. I'm going to build again, and that should all work. So now we have our purchasing and when we tap. So the last function is tick rather. So self.points is we're going to add our points per second, which every time we purchase a point generator, it increases our points per second and adds 1 to the level. So that's nice and straightforward. That's basically where the magic happens. And I'm going to build again, and that should be fine. So now let's jump into our content view and let's create our view. So the first thing we've got to do is in here, we're going to create an observed object, game state, and it's going to be our game state, and I'm going to initialize it, capital G, because in here, this is a capital G. So we're actually initializing this game state, and we're ticking with our timer, and we're doing everything as we said we would. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit. Okay. So in my body, I'm going to get rid of this text score. Text, let's call this tap here. And this text, I'm just going to put on because I'm going to make the button look a little bit better. Actually, you know what? That text can all sit on the same line because I'm going to apply the effect to the whole button. just going to like close this side view here. This button is going to have padding. And you know what? Let's make it a background of color blue. Let's resume so I can see what I'm doing. Content view does have a game state, so I'm just going to build again. Copy, paste. Oh, you know why? Because I used a lowercase s. Let's make it rounded. So I'm going to use corner radius of, let's say, 5. So that's a rounded button. And foreground color, white. So we have a button that's got a white piece of text. Tap here. I'm also going to add some more padding around it. So it's kind of like a smaller button. Then what we're going to have is text. Whoops. And I'm going to put in here the game state points. So then you're going to see how many points you have. Remember, we start with 1 in our game. And this game state is observed, so as the points go up, it's a published variable. It will publish the changes to the view. That looks pretty good. I'm going to make this font headline so it's a bit bolder, a bit more obvious. And then I'm also going to put some text. Now, this text is only going to appear if our points per second is greater than 0, so if we've actually purchased a clicker. So if self.gamestate.points per second is greater than 0, then I'm also going to put some text to say points per second, and I'm then going to put in our game state dot points per second. So at the moment, our points per second are 0, so there's no actual points being accrued per second. But if you have a look, if I press play, if I tap here, my points will go up. Remembering our first generator, if I open this back up and go back to our point generator, our first generator, over here, was a price of 50. So I have to tap 50 times before I can even afford the first generator. Okay. Now for each of our generators, I'm going to create a list. Game state dot point generators, and each one individually is going to be called a point generator. Notice lowercase. I'm going to create a horizontal stack that's going to hold my point generator. Go to the stack, alignment, dot leading. I'm going to have the text, this point generator dot name. So for each of my point generators, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll have our names. And again, when you can change this in the data model, it'll change it here. We want the text, the level of it. Level, point generator dot level. So it's going to be level 0 to start with all of them. Text, points per second, and I'm going to put in my point generator dot points per second. So you can see it'll show the user. This point generator name, I'm actually going to make it font dot headline as well, just so that it's a bit more obvious, because otherwise it's like really hard to read. You can format this a little bit nicer yourself when you go and create this. And the last thing the user is going to need to know is the price. Price. It's going to be X amount of points, and it's going to be the point generator dot price. So now we have all of our details about our point generators, as well as we can tap to add points until we can afford them. So what I'm going to do is this vertical stack, this is in our horizontal stacks, because I'm going to add a spacer here that's going to sit between this stack, which is in blue, and the edge of the screen. And then I'm going to put a button on this side to buy the points, but only if I can afford it. So let's create a group with a button, action, and the label, the text. Text is going to be purchase. So you can see here's our purchase button for each of our point generators. So basically what it's going to do is this action is going to be self.gameState.purchase. And remember, we need to know which point generator we're using. Yep, it's pretty much done. So just this button with the text, I'm actually going to add a modifier to it with a button style. Borderless button style. Borderless button style. And initialize it. And so you can see here are our buttons ready to purchase our items. Now remembering the purchase only works if our button is, if we can afford it, right? So I'm going to disable the button if we can't afford it. So I'm going to go disabled is if the self.gameState.points is less than the point generator price. So basically, if we can't afford it, it'll be disabled, which means it'll be grayed out. So now, when you tap, basically when you get up to your 50 credits for your first point generator, then we can purchase it. Now, when we purchase our point generator, what it's going to do is add 1 point per second, which means our game state points per second is greater than 0, which means it'll show how many points we're earning per second. You can see we're earning 1 point per second. You can see as it goes up with our tick function. That's pretty much all there is to it. So then you can continue to tap, and you can then purchase another level here. And so now we've got level 2, and now we're earning, basically it goes up 7, 9, 11, because we're basically going up by 2 points per second as we tick. And then as we go, we're going to go all the way up to 100 to purchase our second level point generator. There we go. And you can see now we've got one of these and 2 of these. So you can modify this so you might have 1 or 2 dots or something like that. In fact, we might do this here. Where are we? The point generator level, right? So I might put this in a horizontal stack. I might grab this text and place it in here. And I might just leave the level like this. And I might go for between level 1. Let's say if the point generator dot level is greater than 0, then do something else. We're going to put text 0, level 0 for our level. Now, if our level isn't level 0, if it's level 1 or above, for between 0 and our point generator level, level in, I'm going to create a circle, foreground color blue. Actually, you know what? Let's just make it a, foreground color blue, just because then it matches our nice little label here. And I'm going to make a frame width of 20 and height of 20. Our frame needs to be a width, so I need to spell that correctly for that to work. To do with our circle, we've actually got to change this from a background to a stroke border, and I'm going to make my border blue, and I'm going to make it, let's say 5. Sorry, stroke border blue, and line width is going to be 5 for our stroke of our circle. And that's for each of our levels. And at the moment, we don't have any levels. So I'm going to tap to basically purchase my first level, and it's going to go from a 0 to hopefully a single blue circle. There we go. Now we're up to level 1, and we've got 2 circles because our for each should be between 1 and our level. So let's try it again. It resets the game state every time we reopen. So this is where you might use core data to actually save. So here we go, level 1 blue. And so then as we add another level, then it'll draw another circle for me. There we go. And so we can continue to add levels like that.